Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati Podcast, where we dive into how emerging technologies will impact the world and your bank account. I'm Trent Fowler, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Thomas Fry. Thomas and I are futurists, keynote speakers, and consultants with decades of experience in analyzing trends and communicating new developments to audiences across the world. Reach out to us at futuratipodcast.com/contact-futurati if you'd like to hire us for consulting, to speak at your event, or to advertise on our podcast. Thomas, our interview was with Roko Mijic, who is a fascinatingly heterodox thinker. He attracts rather a lot of controversy on Twitter, and he's very well known for some of his thought experiments, particularly Roko's Basilisk, and some of his views on AI governance and AI safety. So most of the conversation was actually focused on the governance piece, which I did not expect. I did not expect that to be the most dominant theme in the whole conversation, but it was, and it was very interesting. So what did you think about the conversation?
Yeah, it got me thinking that how long will it be before I go to the ballot in November and can vote for the AI party? I think in so many areas, it's going to be much easier for AI governance than have humans do it. Humans tend to muck it up a lot.
Well, that was his basic case as well, that we'd do a lot better if we just had algorithms that were trained on our preferences. They did a sort of search over policy space and output that as the direction that a project will go. And he thinks it's going to start on blockchains, which is a great place for it to start, as opposed to putting it in charge of the United States. But I mean, given the way things are going, I've got to think that a lot of people would vote for the algorithm at this point.
I think so as well.
Yeah. So the conversation focused a lot on governance, on AI governance specifically, and on how that would interact with other sorts of governance structures and proposals, how that would ultimately redound to the benefit or the detriment of different kinds of projects, and what the long-term consequences of that would be. We spent a lot of time talking about boundary cases, ways in which this could fail, but ultimately I thought the conversation was very, very interesting and covers a lot of ground that Roko hasn't discussed very much publicly. So hopefully this will contain new information, even for people who've been following him for a while. All right, so without further ado, this is our conversation with Roko Mijic. Tonight, we're joined by Roko Mijic. Roko is a self-described radical centrist, transhumanist, and rationalist who is probably most famous for inventing Roko's Basilisk, a thought experiment sometimes described as the world's greatest infohazard. He has written prolifically on AGI and AI Safety, and his writing can be found at his blog, Transhuman Axiology. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, and don't forget to check out our website, futuratipodcast.com. Roko, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it.
Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on the problems that you're working on today.
Okay, well, that's an interesting question and quite a big topic. I was educated as a mathematician and physicist. I got interested in transhumanism and the singularity around about 2005 to 2006. It was a sort of period in my life when I was sort of trying to decide what to do with myself, and it just sort of seemed obvious to me that, the singularity was the most important thing that's ever going to happen, and I should absolutely work on it. After that, I spent some time, so I moved my academic track more towards AI. I did a little bit of AI research at Edinburgh University after finishing up at Cambridge. And then after that, I very nearly worked for Jürgen Schmidhuber, but the good people at the Singularity Institute, which is now MIRI, so that's Eliezer Yudkowsky and that crowd, convinced me not to do that because, they thought that AI safety was more important at that point. Now, in retrospect, I think that may have been a mistake, actually, but that's how it went down. So then I spent some time at MIRI, or the Singularity Institute, as it was at the time. They ran out of money. They couldn't pay me, so I had to give up on that. I spent some time teaching mathematics after that to sort of just raise some funds for myself. And then I went into machine learning, as a professional. This takes us to roughly the time of COVID. And since then, I've basically been a consultant. I've basically been helping people with blockchain wealth management. And also I've been a sort of quite prolific online poster. talking about issues such as axiology, artificial intelligence, mega scale engineering, that kind of thing. So what am I working on? Well, I have two ideas that I'm actually pretty big into right now. One of them is colonization of ice continents. So I think it may actually be a little bit too late to do this because of how quickly AI is moving forwards, but I think it's an interesting technical idea and I'm talking to people about it. The other one is probably a more important one, but also more crowded, which is basically AI as a form of government. So I think relatively soon the world is going to have to move to some kind of what we might call, cyberocracy or something. So we're going to have to use AI systems to govern ourselves. And that's probably the most important transition we'll ever make is just how that goes. And that is sort of related to AI alignment, although I would not quite call it alignment. I would call it sort of more like goal crafting. So you can think of alignment as a technical side, like is your AI system actually doing what you want it to do? And goal crafting is the more political, philosophical, axiological side of what are you actually going to get this thing to do, right? And how are you going to manage the different competing interests? Because there are going to be, multiple different people and organizations who are going to have very different ideas of what the world should look like. And how can you manage that without, people feeling like they've been left out or even, atomized or something, or conflicts or, any kind of bad outcomes? And how can we maximize the good outcomes as well? So, yeah.
Can we go back to the AI governance real quick?
Sure.
Do you see that happening on a small country, Seychelles or Estonia or something like that first, and then moving to countries?
Well, probably not a country actually, because I think it'll first happen on a blockchain, because blockchains have the ability to try stuff, and if it breaks, some people lose money, whereas countries, if it breaks, people die. So, it's much easier to have an AI governed blockchain where the AI is making decisions which payments should be authorized than an AI driven country where the AI is making decisions about who's going to live and die, et cetera, right?
Okay, so this is more an AI DAO then?
Yeah. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, the problem is DAOs, and for viewers who don't know, that's a decentralized autonomous organization. DAOs kind of have a bad name at the moment because people are trying to run them democratically. So kind of like a club, like an HOA or a social club. You have a series of proposals and people vote on them, and the voting is done with blockchain tech. And I think that's a pretty bad way of doing things. It's basically, you invent a new technology, and the first thing you think to do with it is just to copy the same old systems you had with the old technology. So that's probably not the right way of doing it. I think the AI tech is probably not quite far enough along yet to do useful governance, but it's getting to the point where we can think about that, I think.
Okay.
I was going to ask about the mega projects, because that's one of the recurring themes that Thomas is really interested in. So maybe we'll circle back around to the mega projects, but I want to stick with governance and blockchain first of all. Yeah. So you've done some work in blockchain wealth management. I know you've sort of watched the space for quite a long time.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the vistas that open up with respect to governance as a result of this technology emerging? So, I mean, I agree with you. There's this long-standing argument about scamorphism. When you first invent a new medium or new technology, initially you copy what you had before. So we have desktop calendars, which look just like paper calendars, but you can search them and you can update them a little bit more easily, right? So now they're digital. However, over time, the technology gives rise to new primitives and you can build new structures on it. So I'm sort of aware of some of the governance innovations that have been proposed as a result of blockchain, and I'm curious as to what you've seen that excites you in that area. What would an optimal governance on blockchain look like?
I think basically optimal governance on blockchain looks something like Yudkowsky's coherent extrapolated volition, which you're probably aware of if you've been around less wrong. But basically, let me sort of explain my version of that, which I'd call Elysium. So the Elysium vision is each person is represented with a sort of AI representative that ranks outcomes according to their utility function. So, you know, we're probably getting close to the point where we can have an AI system that will pretty faithfully replicate a person's preferences. You show it a world, you know, they will say, yes, this is worse or this is better. And so everyone gets one of those. And then basically you have some kind of automated bargaining system which searches through possible ways to arrange the world to maximize the weighted sum of people's utility functions, weighted by, you know, some kind of wealth or ownership function. So it could be like you hold a token and the amount of token you hold determines your weighting, and probably also constrained by some constraints like you can't, if you're like a sick murderer and you want to murder somebody, it will not allow you to, it will give 0 weight to that, right? But you know, if you want to like, I don't know, if you want to have like a pet rabbit, or if you want to like grow flowers or something, yeah, that's allowed, right? So that there'll be some constraints, but it basically sort of weighted utility maximization with search, and that's completely unlike any kind of government we have at the moment. So, you know, I do think it's quite a paradigm shift, and of course, you know, that's such a theoretical exposition, right? That's such a sort of high level view of it that we will need to do a lot of experimentation to try this, right, and see what goes wrong, and then incrementally improve on it, try something else, etc. But I think definitely moving beyond having any kind of human representative. So the key is you get rid of human representatives. So it's politics without the politicians, and instead of people, you know, voting for a policy, they're voting for an outcome, effectively. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the problems that we have in our world are because people's ideas about which policies will lead to which outcomes are just super broken. And there's no incentive for politicians to fix this. In fact, politicians are incentivized to sort of play to people's irrationalities. So I think we very recently, and I know you didn't want to make this political, but very recently we saw the Democratic administration in the form of Kamala Harris say that she's going to give $25,000 Help to Buy to every new homeowner in America, which maybe to a sort of normal person sounds like a great idea, but to anyone with an understanding of economics and supply elasticity and stuff like that, you realize it's just literally a cash gift to current homeowners that will be taken off the total government cash pile, or rather added to the debt. So it looks like a transfer to new homeowners, but it isn't. It's a transfer to existing homeowners because the supply of homes is really inelastic. You can't build any more of them. So if everyone who wants to buy one gets $25,000 more, all that happens is all the homes get $25,000 more expensive, and the government loses, you know, 25,000 times n, where it's the number of new home buyers. So yeah, the government loses like, you know, 25 billion or whatever it's going to be, and new homeowners. So it's just a cash transfer to existing homeowners, and it's very hard to prevent the general case of problems like this in our current political system, because you have people voting for policies. Well, they're not even voting for policies. They're voting for promises about policies which are not generally enforced. So, you know, our current politics is just so badly broken that there's like multiple levels on which it's broken. And so I think, you know, moving the world towards governance by AI systems could be a huge benefit in terms of just fixing all of these problems. And I think it is an innovation that would unlock, you know, basically everyone getting 1,000 times richer, everyone having their own beautiful paradise island, people not having to, you know, work for very long, etc., etc. The problem is we're very early along that path, and at the same time, AI will also unlock a lot of dangerous things, you know, and it sort of is already kind of doing that, with things like automated scam calls and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, this is Trent Fowler, co-host of the Futurati podcast. One of the most common pieces of marketing advice I've come across is to know your audience and give them what they want. One difficulty in podcasting is that it's actually pretty hard to do this. None of the major platforms give us any way to reach out to you, our listeners, to find out what you enjoy about the Futurati podcast and what you'd like to see done differently. So we've decided to record this commercial and ask you directly to reach out to us. Head over to futuratipodcast.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite and least favorite episodes, what you'd like to see us cover in the future, and anything else you want us to know. We produce this show for you, and we want your advice so we can make it even better. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about these AI representatives. You said that every person would be assigned an artificial intelligence that through some process has elucidated their utility function, and then there's a mostly automated process of debating and weighing these different concerns, and then what comes out the other side is a policy that does the best job.
I mean, it wouldn't really be debating. It would be like some kind of search function, some kind of simulation. So you would basically simulate different ways that the world could be arranged, right? And you would calculate the total utility, the weighted utility in each of those outcomes. So you're basically doing tree search.
Okay. Tree search governance. That's nice sketchy title for the episode, maybe. So I would call
it cyberocracy.
Cyberocracy.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, Robin Hanson has futurarchy. So, Hanson's futurarchy is basically a similar idea that we should vote on outcomes, not on policies, but it relies on markets. So you're going to have a prediction. In Hanson's version, you have a prediction market that will predict what the total utility is going to be, something like GDP or something like that, conditional on a certain policy being implemented. And then there's a prediction market where people can bet on that. So I've debated this with some people, and I actually think that we're getting to the point where an AI system with tree search or, probably an ensemble model will probably be much better than a prediction market at actually finding the right policies. And it's also, not only is it going to be better, it's going to be something you can sort of A/B test. You can kind of run lots of trial runs of this in simulations before you actually unleash it. But you can't really do a trial run of a market because it's like a unique historical set of events, right? I mean, if it's pretend, people won't bet on it in the same way as if it's real. Whereas with the AI system, you can really laboriously test this out and red team it. So I do think that sort of cyberocracy will beat futurarchy in the end, and the end may not be that long, right? This might be like 20 years and we get to the stage where we can definitively say that an AI system does better than a prediction market.
Interesting. And so in that scenario, it's mostly because you can run all the simulations, whereas you really can't do that as much, and you can't stress test edge cases and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. You get to run the prediction market once and only once, right? For real.
But it seems like, and this is not counting the other questions I had, you don't have people with skin in the game in the same way with a cyberocracy as you do with futurarchy, right? I mean, well, and I think that there's a real problem with people just voting on simulated future worlds. I mean, I would love a future world in which I'm an Olympic swimmer or a billionaire or whatever. I mean, am I willing to get it's? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can sort of test if you have. So the other important difference that I think an AI can get you compared to a market is that if you have the right kind of ensemble of AI systems, you can start to decompose their reasoning and say, well, okay, this system claims that this will lead to this. So we can separately test that out. This system claims that this particular type of medication will make your muscles bigger, and that's a part of the path that's going to lead you to become an Olympic swimmer. So we can test that out separately. And a lot of the way that our world is already built relies upon stuff like this, where you have companies that are supposed to do something, and you have people who watch that specific company and regulate it and invest in it and so on. So there's this sort of decomposability of our current world, and again, you can't really quite get that for markets, because if anyone can bet on a market for any reason, including to try and influence it. They don't necessarily have to be honest. Although the futurarchy opponents will say that it's quite hard to fix these markets, or to sort of corner the market in something and be like, send the probability of an unlikely outcome very high and then cause it to happen, and then because it happens, you get to make your money back by profiting off the disaster that follows or something like that. So you have things like, so you can have outcomes like that you can exclude, but I don't think that's going to be the main problem. I think the main problem with futurarchy is just that a market for a specific event is like a one-off historical artifact. It's not repeatable. It can't be A/B tested. It can't be red teamed in the way that an AI system can. And I think we'll see the sort of like minor versions of cyberocracy. We'll see these sort of minor, like companies and, DAOs in crypto, like I was saying, and blockchains will start using this way before any legacy government actually gets interested in it. And people have already proposed things like, oh, we'll run our blockchain based on future key, but it hasn't actually happened yet, which is kind of strange. But when you look at the details of how the crypto world works, maybe not that strange. But in theory, you could already have done that. And kind of in the early days of Ethereum, you had the DAO, which was supposed to basically be a future key run company. But in the end, it got hacked and it was all like a big fiasco. And since the DAO, DAOs has been a big disappointment, because what tends to happen is you basically get like lots and lots of insiders who have huge piles of tokens, and they do all the voting, and like normal people who have small amounts just don't bother. Like I at some point I held a small amount of the Arbitrum token, and like I never voted on any proposals. They've tried to move forward with delegated voting in crypto. So the reason
delegated staking.
Yeah, right. So you delegate your stake token to a representative. So this is basically they're reinventing politics, because these representatives are then subject to all the same problems politicians are. Right? You can bribe them, they can make errors, they can be underqualified. Like they're subject to all normal politics problems. And the reason that crypto has had to go there is because democracy, which is how they were trying to run their DAOs, suffers from a rational ignorance problem, whereby if you're a voter and you have like 100 Arbitrum tokens, which is probably worth like $50 now, it's not worth your time to vote on any proposals at the Arbitrum DAO, right? Because like some VC has like 1 billion Arbitrum tokens that they basically got for a small investment early stage, and their 1 billion tokens are going to just completely blow up whatever your 50 tokens are going to do, right? And then on top of that, not only is your vote not going to matter, but even if it did, if you had the right idea and it increased the value of the Arbitrum project by 10%, well, you'd get $5 for your work. But the billionaire VC would get $100 million, right? So not only does it not matter, but it's also not really in your financial interest, because those $5 of extra value that your tokens would gain is not worth the time that you would spend to think about it. So basically crypto has sort of like started to reinvent the maladies, the problems, the failings of democracy, because it's too, as you say, skeuomorphic. It's too directly similar to the existing system. But what's really needed is a sort of trustless representative, right? And I think we can get that in crypto with on-chain AI. You could have an on-chain AI system that instead of voting for it, you will literally just like say, okay, I'm going to buy this like it's an NFT and it's going to have my preferences, and off you go, right?
How do you get around the problem of incentives? Because surely getting an AI representative that represents your utility function, I mean, like the RLHF that would be involved, or whatever analogous technique you want to be involved, would surely be pretty labor intensive. I mean, I would have to rank probably 1,000 at least different scenarios.
I see. You see, the thing is, like, in reality, like not every human being's preference bundle is like completely unique, right? So, if you take hundreds of thousands of humans, you get them all to do their own set of, preferences, right? You'll find that they fall on a fairly low dimensional manifold, which is why we have political parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may be a Republican, you don't agree 100% with all the other Republicans, but that's the side you're on. And then within the Republicans, you may be on the libertarian part of the Republican Party. And then within that, you may be on some, like et cetera, right? You might be more Moldbuggian versus, Ron Paul, right? So, but basically human preferences are actually going to fall on these low dimensional manifolds. So basically you are kind of like a set of coordinates on a manifold, on like some kind of hypersurface. And so you're just really a bundle of numbers, right? So all you really need to do is work out what bundle of numbers you are, and that's probably not that hard. You can just find this person with the preferences most similar to you, and then the second most similar to you, and the third one. So you find the 100 people with the most similar preferences to you, and you take the centroid of that, and then you just sort of compare it, and you say, yeah, I agree with everything this is saying. Of course. Okay, I disagree a bit on that dimension and you move it a little bit in that direction, it won't be that hard to find your coordinates in utility function space. And once you found them, you can just like pay for them to be, maximized, right? You can say, okay, these are my coordinates in this 100-dimensional space of, human preferences. Okay, so I'm just going to pay for this thing to like optimize for that.
And then would there be any weighting scheme in that?
If there's a multiple, so you can have a trustless agent that only acts on behalf of one person. So that would be something like a personal AI agent. But you could have multiple people come together to form a, something like an advanced DAO, I guess you could call it. And then, the people could be weighted in, they could be weighted in proportion to the amount of tokens they own. So if you have, 10% of the tokens, your utility function gets 10% of the weight.
So it's not clear to me how that avoids the problem with the weighting that we currently have. Like the VCs with the billion tokens, obviously their votes count for more.
Oh, yeah,
so,
right. That's correct.
So why would that not be just as much a problem?
Right. So it would still be a problem that you have some rich person who has loads and loads of weight, particular DAO. But you don't have to join the same. Now you don't have to. Let's say there's something like some sort of entity, like a blockchain or a country or whatever. You don't have to join that particular thing, right? If there's somebody already who owns like a lot of stake in it, you don't have to join it. But maybe actually you do want to join some large sort of organization, right? It's like a large blockchain or a country. Like, for example, if I hold some ETH, I'm joining like the ETH tribe, right? Even though I own right now I probably own less than 1 ETH, but like at the peak, I probably own like 4 ETH, right? But that's still very small in comparison to the total amount of ETH. And I know that Vitalik and Justin Sun, all these people, they have way more than me, but it's still worth it for me to join the ETH tribe because I believe that it'll make money for me. It'll increase my utility function, right?
Okay.
But in the case of the, something like the Arbitrum DAO, where it's just token weighted voting, I don't really have confidence that those VCs who are voting on what to do are actually going to genuinely try to maximize the value of the tokens, right? Because what they really want to do is dump, right? Like that's what they want to do. They want to dump because.
But couldn't the tree search get output that as a policy? I mean, if you find your coordinates on the utility function hypersurface, I mean, couldn't that be one of the revealed preferences that gets baked into the AI, which is then weighted by their tokens, which then ultimately leads to them doing that? I mean, I guess I'm not really sure what the AI part gets you.
Dumping tokens for cash, basically.
Yes. So if that's actually what you want to do in order, like I'm just thinking through what the game theory for this would be, like why would that not be a possible value in the utility space, which then would be weighted by their tokens, which are substantial compared to yours or mine, and that ultimately that's the policy that is output because that's
right.
That's
I think there are two distinct problems here. So problem number one is like initial distribution of tokens for something like say Arbitrum is really bad, right? A lot of insiders just get a lot of tokens for very cheap because that's just how crypto works at the moment, right? Like it just like there are some places where you have a good initial distribution, like Bitcoin was pretty good.
Yeah.
But good initial distributions are kind of rare. So if you have a bad initial distribution, you just probably don't want to join it, right? Irrespective of whether it's token governance like we currently have or this kind of like cyberarchy type system. You probably just don't want to join and add your resources to something where somebody else already has most of the ownership, right? So you probably found something with better initial distribution, where people are actually paying real money for the tokens at market prices, which generally this does not happen for altcoins, right? This is a problem in crypto. Most holders of altcoins are VCs who get them off the market. They get them for free, or they get SAFTs or something like that. So you want to join a token system where there are nothing like that. Like everyone who holds tokens had to pay for them, had to buy them on the market. So something with a good initial distribution, But then once, even once you have a good initial distribution in token weighted voting on policies or proposals or something, you still have the rational ignorance problem. Because to me, as an individual, let's say there's some new token, like some meme coin or something that's trying to do something, and it's a very fair distribution, right? There's no big whales who got all the tokens for free. You still have the problem that if I only hold $50 worth out of $1 billion, it's just not worth it for me to actually bother to check these proposals, right? So you basically get this large group of people, right, who all like want a certain outcome, but they're trapped in this sort of like bad game theory of nobody wants to be the one who has to pay to basically give good advice, to come up with good policies. Because if you made a coin with a good initial distribution, and you just said, okay, everyone can go to the forums and propose a policy proposal and you can vote on it, you'll just come to the same problems that democracy has: rational ignorance, just voter like lack of knowledge or irrationality, the like policies like rent control and all sorts of dumb policies like that will just be replicated in the crypto world because it's the same system, right? So instead of having this token weighted voting, you would basically have this cyberarchy, cyberocracy kind of system where you would basically just input your utility function coordinates and say, okay, that's what I want. So in the case of like a meme coin or something where you eventually want to sell it, or even just a company where it's just like equity in a company, your utility function is basically just price, right? So everyone's utility function is really the same. It's just how much of, you have a certain ownership, and your only utility function is really price, obviously subject to like not breaking the law and maybe some other ethical side constraints. And then, this AI system will actually start doing search to work out what to do to actually maximize price, right? So, it could be like, oh, it decides that, this is a good business opportunity or that is, or whatever, right? But the point is, this AI system is actually doing the search over policy space. It's not the holders. And so that avoids the, the sort of bad national equilibrium, the tragedy of the commons. It's basically, because good decision making is basically a tragedy of the commons. If you have 1 billion people or 1 million people who each hold some stake in a joint venture, right? Like, they're shareholders. It's not in any one shareholder's interest to bother to work out what the best policy is. But if nobody comes up with a good policy, then the company or the venture just doesn't work. So that's why traditional companies have, like they have C-suites, right? They have professional managers. They have the CEO and so forth who try to do this. But the problem is, within the traditional world, often the C-suite, the people who are supposed to be running it for the benefit of the shareholders, actually don't, right? They actually find lots of clever ways to not run it for the benefit of the shareholders, but instead to run it for their own benefit or for the benefit of their friends or allies, or to basically extract value that's supposed to have gone to the shareholder. And the problem that shareholders have is that the task of checking up on the work of those agents is itself a tragedy of the commons, because any given shareholder would like there to be work done to make sure that the agents are being honest, but it's not in your interest to personally do it, right? So there are very few small activist shareholders. Now, they can be large activist shareholders because then they have quite a big stake. But what you really want is kind of a sort of AI C-suite, right? Your CEO is an AI system, right? And it's got this sort of AI alignment so that it's not going to cheat. It's not going to try to scam you in some way.
Are you enjoying this episode of the Futurati Podcast? If so, please like it, give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. By far, the best way to help us grow is to spread the word on social media, which will expose our content to more people and help us continue to bring you interviews with world-leading experts in AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies, and so much more. Thank you in advance.
So right now is a time when there's a lot of VCs that are deciding to bail out of the market.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading an article that some of them are actually turning to a pay-to-play model. it seems like that's the wrong way to go. But
what's a pay-to-play model?
I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it seems like that's it. Just wondering, yes, is it possible to game test these things first to whatever model you come up with, make sure that that's working? And
oh yeah,
are we headed more towards kind of an era of AI VCs rather than actual humans?
I think being a VC is probably something that AIs are uniquely bad at, because it's sort of like being a VC is kind of like if you're like just a conformist and you just do the same thing that everyone else does, you're probably going to be a pretty good like secretary or a pretty good teacher or something, but you're going to be a really terrible VC. So the current crop of AI systems is very much based on conformity and copying, and just having really good memories and knowing what's already been done in the past. So VC is probably like one of the last professions that's going to get automated. Like it's really very safe against the current crop of AI systems. But I think VCs probably will offload more of the grunt work onto AI systems. Like, there's probably lots of boring low-level work that they have to do, and they'll offload some of that. But the decision-making of deciding what to invest in when you're presented with a bunch of ideas, and the correct idea probably sounds crazy, right? But you have to recognize that this is the one crazy idea out of 50 that's actually, 100x. And I don't think AI is going to be very good at doing that. Like, not the current type of AI.
Well, I mean, how do you not have a similar problem with governance? I mean, governance and VC are not the same thing, but one of the other questions I had about cyberocracy is leaving aside the utility function issues or whether or not it actually gets it all the way. But what if the situation we're facing just doesn't belong to the reference class of any of the simulations we saw? It requires original novel thinking, which it often does. It's just, it rhymes with a historical event in the past, but it's not the same thing. And we need to think innovatively in order to govern our way out of this. It seems like we surely could get in those situations, and then an AI CEO would have exactly the same problem.
Right. But I mean, a lot of the time, the mistakes that governments make are not like that. Like most, if you go to the average country with the average country problems, they are boring problems, typically. So, I mean, browsing around on Twitter, I found there's a community of people who are very interested in sort of neoliberalism and sort of economic progress and sort of YIMBYism, that kind of crowd. And they've done a lot of research into why Britain has such a chronic housing shortage. And there are a lot of very strange things that happened in Britain in the 20th century, such as, like, not only did the government, well, I don't know how much you guys know about this, but basically the government made it illegal to build houses in a large part of the country. And Britain's already quite small for its population. Britain has 1/5 of the US population or something, or maybe like 1/6, right? But it's like, a small state, or the size of a small state. So making it illegal to build on most of the land in the country is going to be a huge deal, right? But not only did they do that, they also unintentionally starved the mortgage market of funds. So the way they did this was they basically set up a cartel system so that there was only a limited set of institutions, building societies, and they had like a board, the National Building Society Board or something, that was actually allowed to give you a mortgage. And then, on top of that, they were messing around with the exchange rate, which had an impact on interest rates. So basically, you had a situation for some significant part of, I think, the 60s and 70s, where there was like rationing of mortgages, right? Mm-hmm. So there was still some land that people wanted to build on it, but the government had basically made it illegal, kind of, to get a mortgage, right? It was illegal for people to lend to you. And so they sort of did housing shrinkflation in Britain. So British houses, or certain English houses, are smaller, much smaller than American ones. And we still have like the 2 taps and all that stupid, old-fashioned. Have you seen that when you go to the UK? You have like the 2 different taps, one for hot and one for cold, and you mix a tap and all this stupid stuff, right? Like, single glazing, poor insulation, small houses, not very tall, like only 1 or 2 levels tall instead of like 6 or something. So all these problems sort of combine into this disgusting housing shortage. But like none of these problems are really particularly. It's just like if you just followed what an Econ 101 textbook said to do, none of this would have happened, right? So there shouldn't have been a cartel for mortgages. There shouldn't have been like a ban on building houses on most of the land. Like it's just Econ 101, and governments can't get it right. And this has incredible impacts on people's lives, right? This has destroyed the country. And it's just Econ 101.
Okay. So would there be a tripwire to turn it over to a human being if there's an unprecedented situation? I'm just thinking like the Ukrainian DAO on the eve of the Russian invasion, right? Like surely that's something you'd want a human in charge of.
Well, I mean, the Ukraine war is probably, it's a little more complicated, but I do happen to have a little bit of insider information on this. Apparently the reason that Putin invaded Ukraine is that within his regime, there were two different groups of people who lied to him without knowing about the other group. So the army lied to him and said that the army was ready to invade and that their troops are ready, and that was a lie. Basically, the troops were stealing the petrol, they were stripping the copper out of the tanks. The reason the army lied is because they didn't think there was going to be an invasion, right? Because obviously, basically to invade Ukraine, right? So they were engaging in petty corruption and grift. They were stealing, like the tanks didn't have petrol when they invaded, so that's why the armored advance like just stopped, because the tanks didn't have petrol. They were going to petrol stations and stealing food and stealing, like the tank was literally driving up to a Ukrainian petrol station a couple of hours after it invaded the country and like holding it up with their guns and like putting petrol into the tank because they didn't have any, because they'd stolen it to sell because their salaries are too low, right? So, but the other group that lied was his intelligence agencies lied to him and said that Ukraine would surrender. And the reason they lied was because they were kind of patriots. They wanted the invasion to happen, and they knew that if they told him the truth, he probably wouldn't invade. So they lied and they said, "Look, they're gonna fold. It's gonna be over in 24 hours or something." And so the collision of these two different lies from these two groups that didn't know about each other, well, they knew that they existed, but they couldn't coordinate these lies, because if they went around saying, "Hey, we're about to lie to Putin," Putin's gonna shoot you, right? So they had to do it on the download. But the coincidence of these two lies has basically probably destroyed Putin's regime and potentially even destroyed Russia. So, having, for geopolitical and I can't give you a source on that, but that is what I think actually happened. And there are various sort of publicly available pieces of information that will point to this, right? That it is publicly known that his army was basically lying to him, right? So for geopolitical and strategic calculations, right? An AI system is vastly preferable to humans, because when you ask it questions like, will my tanks run? Will they actually drive? Do they have ammunition? Do they have petrol, food, etc.? If I invade this country, it'll probably tell you the truth, or at least if it's a well-designed AI, it'll tell you the truth. And you can probably red team that better than you can red team humans. So now the Ukrainian response was pretty good, but they had help from the US, and the US is like the best in the world at this. And most countries, military and intelligence services are not anywhere near the level of US competence, right? So yeah, I think, I think we can look at humans and we can see the best of humanity. We can see the best responses, but the average response of humans, the average performance of humans is terrible. It's really bad. At least in a lot of areas, or in some cases, the average performance is okay, but the bottom decile performance is really bad, and that bottom decile destroys lots and lots of value, right? So the British government not implementing basic econ textbook stuff in the 20th century has sort of destroyed the country, right? Because it's caused a demographic crisis and et cetera, for really no benefit. Nobody really gained much from that. There are some things probably where there maybe was some element of conflict, but yeah, I think that the right kind of AI system could improve on
Interesting.
So one question I had was, see, one thing I hate doing is I hate going through these lists of privacy. I have to decide how much privacy I want because there's a trade-off on every one of these items, and I don't know what.
Oh, you mean like the cookie banners?
I want AI to make those decisions for me based on its understanding of how it would do things.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
How long before we get to that?
What you mean, like for when you go to a website and it says you have to like click to accept cookies, that kind of thing?
Well, not just that. There's all. Do you want this email? Do you want that email?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. There's.
I think we're pretty close to that. This is basically like a personal AI assistant type task, if you like. And yeah, we're pretty close to that. I think we're close enough. I've had people call me and email me and pitch building this. And I think Google has been trying to build it for a while, but Google's kind of incompetent. Somebody's definitely going to build this. 100%. Okay. But I mean, like this is not very hard because, like, you know, it's mostly going to be like most people are going to have. You know, there's going to be like it's going to be like a very low dimensional space of personal, sort of preferences here. Like some people are going to be hardcore privacy, some people are going to be hardcore I'll accept everything, and some people are somewhere in between. But it's not going to be that hard. There's not going to be much personalization. So really, it just boils down to building the best single product, pretty much, and getting people to pay for it. Actually, So I mean, you have like browser extensions, like to some extent. Things like AdBlock Plus are kind of already that because everyone doesn't want to see ads. So they just built a system that blocks the ads, and it doesn't really need much AI. But AI will probably make ad blockers better because AIs will be able to recognize which pixels on the screen constitute an ad, and it will be able to track down which part of the CSS or HTML that's coming from, and it'll get rid of them. Right. So yeah, I think that's going to happen. I think that's easy enough that it's not interesting to me.
So how long before we get rid of passwords? I equally hate passwords.
Well, they're trying to do something called sign on with Ethereum. I don't know whether you've heard of that. So basically, instead of having passwords, you basically have a hardware wallet with your Ethereum, private keys on, and you just use some derived keys instead of passwords. So you basically, you'll just have sign on with Ethereum all over the web. Now, to some extent, they've already done that, but it's like sign in with Google and sign in with Facebook and stuff like that. The problem with sign in with Google and sign in with Facebook is Google and Facebook are, unreliable agents because if they suddenly, for some reason, don't like you, they can just completely nuke your Google account. And people have had this happen for political reasons, or sometimes they'll upload some photos of their kids, and Google's algorithms will accidentally label it as child porn. And it's very hard to get your Google account back if that happens.
It is, yeah.
I think, like they just, they have like 1 billion customers, so they just don't have a customer support system. So it's kind of worrying to have a lot of your life depend on Google, which we all do, because it can nuke things that badly. So yeah, I mean, then it becomes a question of how do you build a sort of more decentralized alternative to Google that can't just like nuke all your stuff if they don't like you.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that some pioneering entrepreneur in the blockchain develops just such a solution. It's one of the primary use cases for that technology. Yeah. I want to spend a little bit of time, the time we have left, talking about axiology and your broader approach to transhumanism and futurism in general. So your Substack is called Transhumanist Axiology. I suspect axiology would be a term that most people aren't familiar with, but it has obvious implications for the broader discussion that we've had about utility functions and governance and, coordination and game theory and all of this. So why don't you just walk us through a little bit about that term and why you chose it and what the role that it plays in your thinking about the way things will unfold.
Yeah. So, I actually originally had a blog called Transhuman Goodness a very long time ago, back in the 2000s. and I've sort of gone through various names, but I decided to come back to Transhuman Axiology as my current blog name. So basically, axiology is the study of what's valuable, like your friends, family, going to parties, eating food, getting high, whatever it is you like, okay, or dislike. So you could distinguish axiology from morality in that morality is generally more concerned with the way that you interact with other people or other entities, whereas axiology sort of subsumes that, and it could be something where you interact with others, but doesn't have to be. And I think it is sort of becoming increasingly grossly understudied because, and this is sort of complex, but basically, in the past, people didn't really need to study axiology that much because most people have the same basic needs: water, food, shelter, etc. Right? And for most of human history, the things that people needed were all the same.
Those were your concerns.
Basically.
That's all you had time to care about.
Yeah. And now there are more complicated, there are more complex needs. Like, we've suddenly, got into a phase of civilization where, for example, the meanings of words that people use around you has become a variable, right? So 20 years ago, if you said a woman, you were like, oh, a woman, right? But now if you say woman, you're like, oh, a woman? Well, what kind of woman are you, right?
Are you a male woman, or are you
a male woman or a female woman, right? So suddenly, right?
Oh,
suddenly, things that were constants have become variables, right? And that's increasingly going to happen. I've got a girlfriend. Oh, what kind of girlfriend? A human girlfriend or an AI girlfriend?
Is she an AI?
Right, yeah. Oh, my girlfriend's a model. Oh, really? Is she? What kind of a fusion model? Or like,
Yeah.
Or a transformer base model? Like, so things that were constants in the past have become variables. So it now becomes very important to think about, what is it that we really want out of life? And not only that, but also we've become richer. So things that were hard to get in the past have become kind of trivial. So trivially, people have water in the West, right? Like, well, okay, maybe if you're in Flint, Michigan, that's a problem. But like, apart from
right.
Did you hear the joke about that one? Did you know that 99% of US doctors recommend that people should avoid drinking fizzy drinks like pop and soda and just drink tap water instead? 99% of doctors recommend that.
Wow.
And do you know where the 1% of doctors who don't recommend it live?
No, where?
Flint, Michigan. But water is mostly, right? We joke about it because water is mostly like, yeah, you got water. Just go to the tap, get some water, okay? And it's going to be mostly pure. It's going to contain a little bit of fluoride, maybe. It's almost certainly not going to kill you. It's almost certainly not going to contain dangerous pathogens, etc. But now that we have become richer, there is some disagreement over exactly what kind of higher needs are legitimate to have. So now we have some people who are arguing that you should have the right to transition to a different gender. Some people want to transition to a different race. Some people want to identify as disabled even though they're not, or they would say that they are, but you know what I mean.
It doesn't make any sensible definition.
Right. Yeah. So this starts to matter, and there are a whole bunch of things. Like you can be on the other end of this. You can be like, well, I want to live in a world where if I open a dating app and select female, there will only be real, genuine biological females. There will not be any of these sort of other types of females, right? Or I want to be in a world where when I go to the internet and interact with a person on social media, it will be a real person with flesh and blood and, like a real physical body, and they have a mother and a father and stuff. It will not be some kind of bot that someone's created. So it does actually start to matter now in the sort of, you could say to some extent we're already in a post-scarcity world for like scarcity for basics. It starts to matter how you treat these higher order goods. And also the sort of ceiling of what's possible in terms of utility has gotten a lot higher. But I would argue that our ability to reach that ceiling is severely limited by various types of corruption and waste that are happening. So, I mean, we have really high taxes. Taxes before World War One were like 2% or something. Is it really right that the government steals 60-50% of your pay? I mean, maybe...
Do you need a dynamic and knowledgeable speaker for an event? Thomas Fry and me, Trent Fowler, are both seasoned keynote speakers, able to converse on a wide array of topics to audiences of all sizes and skill levels. Go to the contact page at futuraudiopodcast.com to book Thomas or myself today, and let us apply our years of experience in public speaking to make your event a smashing success.
And in the past, those taxes were justified by things like, well, there's an existential war of survival. We have to fight this war, so the taxes have to be higher. Now it's justified by like, well, somebody who's from a different country and doesn't even speak your language wants to come here and stay in a hotel, and you're going to pay for it. Or somebody like some woke university wants to do a dissertation into the like sexual orientation of 15th century Czechoslovakian cloud formations, and they're going to get $1 million in funding from the council, and we're going to rob you at gunpoint to pay for that. So like people still work a lot. Another one is things like the life extension, right? We are not spending enough money on life extension, as in like immortality, right? I thought, like, I heard about this stuff back in, say, 2005, 6, 7, and I was like, this is definitely going to be a huge thing by the 2020s, but it isn't, right? We're actually taking steps backwards, and the National Institute of Aging has actually basically been cancelled and turned into an institute for dementia. So, aging and death is one of the worst things that happens to people personally, and our governments are not doing anything about it, right? That's terrible, right? But, if you look at the political process as a whole, there's always distractions. There's always there are various causes that have powerful political lobbies. So yeah, I mean, like there are a bunch of these other things that, coming up as more important. What is the future of the human race? What is the future of space exploration? What is the future of, like new countries, new polities that you can go to, network states, things like that, that go beyond just having a government that's competent enough to supply fresh water and edible food, and a minimum amount of security. So I think at this point it kind of is important to think about what we really want more clearly, and how we can make sure that we actually get it.
That's fascinating. And so it's a study of values, although it occurs to me a non-trivial fraction of that is actually epistemological confusion. So I think that if you're getting into the debate, and we don't have time to, but if we were going to get into the debate about what a woman is or what a man is, and how all that intersects with trans issues, I think ultimately that comes down to an epistemological question. It's how you define that concept, and then how you change it over. I'm only aware of one morality that has its basis in an analysis of values and what values are and how they work, and that's objectivism. That's Ayn Rand's approach to morality. So it's the only one I know of that actually tries to answer that question directly and builds all of morality up from that basic observation that living things pursue values in order to continue to live. You spin that out inductively, and then you arrive at her ethics.
Yeah. I mean, sure. Obviously, I don't think objectivism is the be all end all. I think personally, I think that kind of line of thinking doesn't pay enough attention to the need for coordination. So on top of thinking about what it is we want and what it is we need, we also need to think more about how we can coordinate to get it rather than to fight each other, because a lot of the effort that's being expended in the world today is a form of fighting. It's not fighting with weapons, it's fighting with words and fighting with politics, fighting with cancellation and stuff like that. But we've certainly regressed. And I kind of was a bit sad. I watched some videos on the L5 Society, and so back in the late 70s, very early 80s, transhumanists were very interested, or the early precursors to transhumanism were very interested in basically colonizing near-Earth space. And they were saying things like, oh, we're going to have like a colony in L5 with 10,000 people by 1995. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's 2025. And we have actually regressed since then.
Yeah.
We weren't even on the moon. I mean, there is some more hope with things like SpaceX, but it's basically, it's kind of like coming back to Ayn Rand. Literally the only thing that's actually worked is John Galt. Like literally nothing else has worked. If you take away Musk and Bezos, can you imagine how depressing things would be right now? And even on the network slide, it's Balaji Srinivasan and Peter Thiel. Like basically, there's kind of like four men: Balaji, Elon, Bezos, Thiel. If you took away those four men, can you imagine how depressing the world would be right now? Like literally nothing good will be happening. It would literally just be debates over like transgenderism and
Who gets to use the bathrooms?
Yeah, he gets to use the bathrooms and how many like illegal immigrants are going to let him this year. So yeah, I mean, something is wrong. The fact that the only positive developments are down to a very small cadre of billionaire philanthropists is a clue that something is deeply wrong with the way that we run the world, and it is, right?
Fascinating. Well, there's kind of a lot to say about that, but we will have to wrap it up here. Maybe have you on another time to debate axiology and morality and all of those things. But I think that this has been very fascinating. So your Substack is called Transhumanist Axiology. That's
Transhuman Axiology.
Transhuman Axiology, and axiology is AXIOLOGY. Axiology, it's the study of values. It's a philosophical term. So Transhuman Axiology, if you want to check that out. You're on Twitter. I think it's your name, yeah, Roko Mijic.
Correct. Yeah, I'm at Roko Mijic on Twitter. I have 11,000 followers. So yeah, and we I mean, it was a fascinating debate. I think there's a lot more to cover here, and right now I'm sort of trying to decide how to really pursue AI governance, or how we can govern the world with AI as my next step. I was, as I said at the beginning, I was thinking about ice colonization, but I've thought about it for a bit, and it may be a little bit too late right now. We're too close. Somebody should have done this in 1980. Basically.
I see. Well, it's good because the last question is colonizing the icebergs, but we spent all our time on governance. So I'm glad to know that we correctly intuited the right direction to take this conversation.
I think so. I mean, maybe another time. I'm trying to get hold of Eric Drexler to pitch it to him.
Interesting. Okay. We haven't interviewed him, but we'd like to at some point, though. Excellent. Well, thank you, Roko. We really appreciate the time, and we wish you the best of luck on future projects. If you want to come back and debate these issues, then we'd be happy to do that as well.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.